Hi, my name is Allison Buckenterrell. I'm a producer with The Agenda with Steve Paikin at TVO. 2 weeks ago, I was in Hamilton for a community conversation put together by the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction. One of the things that I was hoping to do at that event was ask some of the people that attended what they thought about the final report of the Commission for the Review of Social Assistance. Unfortunately, I was unable to do it at that event, but that's why we're here today. So I'm joined by three members of the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction, and I'm going to get them to introduce themselves first.
Hi, I'm Laura Katari, and I'm an ODSP recipient.
I'm Sandy Leyland, and I'm on ODSP as well.
I'm John Mills, and I'm on Ontario Works.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. So I'm going to keep it pretty simple and get right to my first question. I want to get your guys' immediate reaction to the review. What did you think of the recommendations? Maybe we'll start with Laura and we'll work our way down.
Well, I was pleasantly surprised. It ended up being a lot bolder than what I thought it would be. There is a little anxiety with some of the recommendations, and especially how they would be implemented. Some great ideas in there. Just worried that it might get cherry-picked and any of the benefit that may happen may disappear if they don't do everything as a package.
Mm-hmm.
The worries I have are them aligning OW and ODSP, because I'm quite convinced that they'll lower the ODSP rates instead of raising the welfare rates. And the fact that they're going to allow us to make $200 without having any deductions. We're the only people in this province that work and have half their paycheck taken away from them. And I really think we should be able to keep everything we earn up to the low income cutoff, depending, in your community. So there are some other concerns I have, but those are the two main ones.
I concur with Laura. I was rather impressed with the report, but again, I have reservations about the government of the day cherry picking what they choose and even implementing it in haphazard fashion, so it creates more chaos than benefits. I think if it is implemented properly and if they can get the corporate structure on board properly, it would be a great thing to see in the province.
Mm-hmm. Now, I guess if we can talk a little bit about some of the difficulties you guys face with the system right now, maybe that'll give us a better idea in terms of what you think will work about the report and what you don't like about the report. So let's start with John this time.
What I like?
Yes.
I like the broad scope of it. It really does capture a new thought process, and if that thought process carries through to the government of the day and they actually implement it properly, I think maybe we will see a change in society's view of the working poor, and hopefully we'll have a lot more people working rather than trying to escape work because it doesn't pay for them to work. In terms of negatives, it's because it's so big, it has much potential to be misapplied.
I agree with John. I think there's a real strong chance that they'll abuse what's been put out there, and like Laura said, cherry pick, and they'll take what suits them first. What I would like to see is the government mandate that we be treated with respect and dignity, that all people and our human rights not be violated the way they have been for however long there's been a welfare system. It's gotten better over the years. My grandmother told me stories of raising 6 kids on relief during the Depression, and it was really, really hard, and how my grandfather had to go out and do meaningless work so that they could get a check, so he wasn't given something for nothing. So, I mean, we have come ahead, but we really, really need to move far beyond where we are right now. And this is a small step, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and basically it's the outlook of government and general public on what we're really like. We're not lazy. I would rather be working than sitting here. Not that I wouldn't. You're a nice person, but I'd rather be working.
For myself, I guess what I like is the acknowledgement that the rates are far too low, that people cannot um, survive on these rates, that people are going hungry, and it needs to have some sort of rational evidence-based system. I love that they've made that really clear, that they've acknowledged low-income people, some of the benefits that we currently get on social assistance need to be extended to low income, not things cut back for us and no one gets anything. The one criticism I have, or a huge fear to be quite honest, is with the amalgamation of OW and ODSP that they recommended, this idea that the pathways to employment would also be amalgamated, and creating some sort of disability measurement tool. I don't find realistic that it will work for everyone. I don't think there is one tool that will fit everyone. And for people that experience reoccurring or chronic illness, that tool might actually leave them worse off than they currently are.
Well, something that you've all focused on is the idea of adequacy. And Laura, you talked a lot about this the last time you were in for an interview with us with Steve, is the idea that we need to have a rate that's inclusive of both food and shelter and allows people to not have to make a really difficult decision about whether they're going to pay for food or for housing. And I'm wondering, they're saying that they want to create a basic measure of adequacy. And what did you think of the recommendations around that? And how do you think we can measure that?
It's interesting. I mean, the figures they came up with are far better than what are currently there. And on that score, I was so much happier, especially when I look at OW recipients who receive $599 a month if they're singles. There are problems with the rate that they calculated. And one of the basic things that I found up there was comparing it to minimum wage in Ontario, that even if people worked 40 hours a week, which does not exist anymore, a 40-hour-a-week job, they still live below low-income cutoff. So comparing what is adequate to something that's already inadequate, I don't think is a fair assessment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now you talked about the concern that they're going to cherry pick certain things over other recommendations. Do you have a sense of what might be more attractive for them to cherry pick versus the ones you think are important and should be implemented as well?
Some of it would be looking at possibly eliminating special diet to pay for a $100 increase for OW without doing full assessment rates. And what that would do, in my case in particular, I did talk about this last time I was in with Steve, that would reduce my income and not help me in any way, shape, or form if you don't look at the system as a whole. And we're afraid that they're going to take away some things, like they call it zero-sum effect. There will be no new money in the system. And it sounds good on an accounting basis, but it really doesn't take into account other ministries that bear the brunt of not doing this properly, like the ministry.
Mm-hmm. Now, I guess, John, can you share your experience as well? How do you think it's going to tackle some of the difficulties that you're facing in your day-to-day life?
Well, for certain, it would improve my financial outlook. $599, even that is a joke. I don't get that because I have a roommate and we actually found rent that doesn't come up to the maximum that's provided. So consequently, I only get $567 a month, which is a joke to live on. I mean, it's unreasonable. You can't pay hydro, and you have to have a phone because you're supposed to be getting a job. You can't do that without a phone. So without a doubt, I would be better off financially and might even have a hope of finding a job because I would have access to transportation because of a bit more money. I'd be able to afford to go somewhere other than on foot. I think that would be the primary benefit for me is just having a little more freedom to be able to live a life rather than just exist on the fringe of starvation.
Now, they've said they're going to try to raise the rates by $100. Do you think that's enough to really make a difference to your life, or would you like to see the rate increase a little bit more?
Obviously, I'd like to see it more. If I would, $667 would not be a whole lot better than $567, but when you're talking 20% more, that's substantial. And the fact that they're saying that there isn't $700 million to fund it as is, I'm not thinking that that's going to increase. But when they get to the if and when they get to the full implementation and establish a BMA, then I'm certain that ultimately it will be substantially higher than that, because it can't be any lower for sure.
Mm-hmm. Now, for the two of you that are receiving ODSP, there was a big focus in the review looking at whether ODSP should be given more employment supports. Now, I guess I'm just wondering, Laura, when you were here, you talked a lot about the barriers that you find in terms of employment. Do you think it's going to address that and give you enough supports to help you get into employment, or is there anything missing that you think should be added into that equation? Excuse me.
I like the idea of going to Employment Ontario, and that we all have equal access in Ontario to employment supports. What I find people don't realize is that to be competitively employed is really difficult. And we're not talking just physical accommodation, the day I need my wheelchair as opposed to my walker, but being competitively employed in terms of how many work hours I can work in a week. And to put it down to simply my obligation to find employment without looking at other measures in Ontario to encourage employers to take someone on for 2-3 days a week is really, really important. And the other thing about the $200 earned income, I have been trying self-employment, and if that was the case, I wouldn't have any deductions for almost half of this year, because through self-employment, especially first year startup, I've been lucky to be making $200 a month in self-employment. But it is really hard to start off. And when you're starting off with nothing, those first few $100s that you make are going towards paying for things that you've been lacking, especially if you've been ill and on disability for any of the time, lacking for 9-10 years. You're trying to get yourself up to what your fellow people are, and that could be clothing, that could be paying off debt, that can be just getting things that are broken around your house. I know for myself, it took 6 years before I could afford a mattress, even though my old one was torn. And especially one that was better for accessibility instead of a futon near the floor, which is more affordable. I can't do that physically. So there are a lot of things that aren't taken into consideration. The transportation aspect in getting to jobs on time, even locally, our young people, busy rush hour, they don't understand. And I understand the buses are full, but I would need to get to work on time. So there are a lot of things that need to be balanced out before it becomes a reality that maybe expectations for us be exact.
Mm-hmm. Now, I guess just to finish up, going forward, I think one of the challenges, and I wrote a bit about this on my blog when I blogged about the review when it finally came out, is that it's going to be a challenge of getting the political will, especially in a climate of austerity with the challenges that we're facing provincially with the government. What do you think it's going to take to get these recommendations on the agenda? Who do you think is going to take them forward and to champion them? I know that you guys have a very strong anti-poverty movement in Hamilton, but I guess I'm thinking, how do we translate that into a wider conversation?
I think we should be pushing the MPPs in our areas. There's a lot of us across the province that are subsisting on the system, and we all need help in our own ways. And it's sort of a blanket approach that they have now. What they need to do is individualize it a lot more. And again, we need to be treated with some respect and dignity, which is, some of the workers out there are fantastic. They bend over backwards to help us, and others are the absolute opposite. But we really need, I mean, I came so close to having a great paying job in 2008, just after I went on year after I went on disability, but I needed a car. When I asked the ODSP office in Hamilton if they will fund the car for me for the first 3 months and then I could take over myself, they said, no, I'm on disability and I should be lucky that I get to sit at home all day long. You know, I'm not that type of person. I'm out every day doing something. I volunteer all over the city. I need to keep busy, and you know that would have put me off. It would have been cheaper in the long run than keeping me on disability. I could have been working now, you know. And there's other people out there that are in the same boat. So it's. I know they really need to broaden it. You know, like it seems that we get blamed for we get cut. Our stuff gets cut every time any provincial, you know, the province needs to cut funding. We're the ones that cut. So I would really like to see them rechange their priorities and help take care of us so we are a great province to live in. And that will bring in more, because if more of us are working, then there's more money being spent in our communities, which raises the tax base for the community and for the province. So it's a win-win situation if more of us can find work that's meaningful and pays.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important as well to reframe what the discussion is. Are we talking about making tough choices, or are we understanding we're dealing with a group of people who have no choices? And understanding as well, and like Sandy just said, yes, there are a whole bunch of areas that don't have the same problem as the larger cities, and I understand that. But by creating healthier cities, urban centers in Ontario, we'll actually end up relieving the burden from the rural areas. And it is a form of long-term thinking, and it's getting people to think long-term. What do people need to get back to work? What do we need to do to stimulate the economy? Well, having people spending money stimulates the economy, and if we were able to purchase food, for instance, what's the fall off from that just in terms of supermarkets and the people who are going to transport them, et cetera, et cetera. And there is value in social assistance. It does have an economic impact. And it creates jobs. And it's those same jobs that we need to create in this economy to get us off the system.
I think over the last 40 years, there has been study after study after study that has shown that poverty costs a lot more than whatever investments you make to try and end poverty. And that is something that government after government has chosen to ignore for whatever reason. I think putting pressure, as Sandy said, on our MPPs and even supporting municipalities to get all of the costs uploaded back onto the province like everywhere else in Canada. We are the only province that has costs downloaded to municipalities. And I think if there is a whole rethink of the structure of poverty, what causes it, and how to eliminate it, starting with this report, it would be a great benefit, but it has to be completely rethought and reevaluated, and something meaningful done about it rather than just initiate commissions because it's the right thing to do and then ignoring them.
And lastly, political will comes from us, the people who vote. And this is one situation where speaking up and saying having people live on $5.99 a month or social assistance rates in general is ludicrous, and you have to do something about it. And it really takes our neighbors speaking up and the rest of our citizens to turn around and say, you know, this is ridiculous. They can't find jobs living in this situation, and we want them to be able to work. And until politicians hear our neighbors speaking up on their behalf as well, I don't think there will be change, really.
We need to get people out there to vote. There's a lot of people middle class and down, and I was middle class for a number of years before I ended up on disability. And I voted, and I had to argue with a lot of my workmates to get out and vote and defend. And I was defending social assistance because I raised my kids on what was mother's allowance back in the 70s and 80s. And I know from both ends of the stick, the only thing I haven't been now is independently wealthy. I'm hoping that will change one day. Hoping it will change one day. But we need that. It's the political priorities, like Laura said, needs to change. And it's the political will needs to get strong. We need strong leaders in this province who won't be afraid to stand up to the corporations and say, okay, you guys are going to have to pay more in taxes, and that money is going to be diverted to the social assistance and not going into politicians and lobbyists' pockets. Because the money is there. I mean, like we see at the paper all the time how many billions have been wasted here, there, and everywhere. And it's certainly not us wasting the money because we don't have any money to waste. And as Laura said, and as a report that Chief Cabersi did in this city, is that we put back into the community. Anybody who's working puts back in. We can't help what the politicians do at any level when they allow jobs to leave the country. But we need work, and we need help right now to live with some dignity. Human rights are being eroded. We can't complain about any other country abusing their citizens around human rights when we are being abused, that our human rights are being taken away.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you guys taking the time, so thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you for having us with you.
My pleasure. Well, and I just want to make note that this is part of Why Poverty, which is a cross-media event. To learn more about the series, please go to our website, theagenda.tvo.org. You can also check out tvo.org/whypoverty. Once again, I'm Alison Buckenterrell, and thank you for joining us.